A detached home located at 1099 Caldwell Avenue in Mississauga sold for an $800,000 loss last month, which was an $800,000 loss. And that's 30%, guys. 30% loss in the real estate market. And again, adjust that number to inflation. You're probably looking at around 50%, if not 60% decline. In this video, I'm going to expose the Canadian real estate cover-up. People are saying the market isn't crashing. People are saying the market is booming. But in this video, I'm going to show you how that is not the case with some real examples of what is actually happening, the huge losses that people are in fact taking. So let's get right into it with this to start with. Brampton House sold for $640,000 loss 2 years after purchase. Oh my God. So a Brampton house that just sold for a $640,000 loss after it was listed a handful of times speaks to the state of the market in the outskirts of Toronto, real estate experts say. The detached two-story house located at 27 Jacksonville Drive sold for $1.7 million on January 5th. The house sold for $2.3 million 2 years earlier in January 2022. And for those of you that don't know, that was literally the peak of the real estate mania in Canada. It actually peaked out around February, March, just before that 25 basis point hike. But it was around that time, January 2022. So it's absolutely crazy when you think of that loss. To put that into perspective, that's a 20% loss, and that is nominal. We're not even talking about adjusted for inflation. Just think about how much inflation has been raging since then. You know, you are talking about 30, 40% real loss. And that's how I look at stuff, is I look at real adjusted for inflation prices. I take those even with a grain of salt because I know that inflation is running a lot higher than incomes right now. So you can't really rely on that model too much, but it gives you an indication of whether people are actually losing money in the real world when it comes to home prices, even if prices are going up. And I think this is something that people don't think could happen, which is actually what I think is most likely will happen with this bubble. So at the time, prices were completely out of control and in many cases highly artificial, Toronto real estate agent Desmond Brown said. Oh yeah, I'm sure he was saying that back then. We always knew that when prices were going crazy during the pandemic and post-pandemic, that the outlying areas of Toronto would suffer the most when things settled down or there was a turnaround, Brown said. Can you believe that this is what's coming out of real estate agents' mouths right now after they literally were propagating that this market was just going to continue going on forever because of immigration, baby, immigration. And I'm going to show you how the immigration argument is just completely dead. Over the past 3-4 years, we've had the best scenario happen to show that the lies you've been told by central planners, politicians, YouTubers, real estate agents, and so-called industry experts are in fact complete bullshit. So anyway, we'll get into that in a second. But first of all, I want to show you this because, again, just another huge loss. This one is, in fact, even worse than the Brampton loss. And we're going to get into some other ones as well, which are, in fact, foreclosures / power of sales. So a detached home located at 1099 Caldwell Avenue in Mississauga sold for an $800,000 loss last month after selling $400,000 over asking at $2.6 million in the spring of 2021. A year later, in March 2022, it was listed a dozen times for $3.4 million. And what I want you to note there is that is much above the $2.6 million right here. So why do you think people are doing that? It's because they're speculators. This is what I've been saying the whole time. So many people are speculating in the real estate market and they don't even realize it. Even if they're living in that home, if they're counting on that home for appreciation to make money, they're speculating just like people who are renting it out cash flow negative, thinking the value is just going to go up indefinitely. So it's absolutely insane. But this is a 30% loss, guys. So a year later in March 2022, it was listed a dozen times at $3.4 million. Over the time, the price was reduced until it sold at $1.8 million in December, which was an $800,000 loss. And that's 30%, guys. 30% loss in the real estate market. And again, adjust adjust that number to inflation, you're probably looking at around 50%, if not 60% decline. And just to illustrate how large this bubble is, guys, just remember that sold for 1.8 million. That is not an affordable price tag. So that shows you how just insanely crazy overvalued this bubble is when you consider that you can have a real price decline of over 50%. And once again, I don't think anybody would argue with that. From 2021 to pretty much 2024, when they sold that, the inflation that we've had, you are talking about a massive haircut. Your money was worth way more back in 2021 than it is today. So again, 50%, over 50% decline in the price. And we're talking about in a major area here, Mississauga. We're not talking about some random town in rural Ontario, because a lot of those places have got hit particularly bad. And anyway, I want to move on and just quickly just show you that it's complete myth what you hear all the time from the industry, the central planners, that immigration is what drives home prices higher. Now, I will agree that immigration does cause a massive impact on the rental market, and it also affects speculation massively. Because if you have loads of immigrants coming in that you know that you can rent your home to, then essentially that just allows more speculators to get into that market, because you've always got this high demand. And Canada has had no shortage of speculators. But you have to realize the people that are coming into this country are mostly low-wage, low-income workers. So even if they were having a massive impact on home prices in Canada, they would have to be in households of 10 people to be able to afford and qualify for that house. And that does happen with multi-generational households. It's more common in Chinese and Indian society than in Canadian society. But then if you're having household sizes of 5-10 people, then, you know, the amount of supply you actually need is reduced by like 75%. So you have to kind of realize how this argument for immigration is flawed. And I want you to understand it, so every time you hear it, you're more educated on it than these people who just constantly quote it. They seem to do no looking into it, no critical thinking whatsoever. So this is number of immigrants coming into Canada, 2000 to 2023. 2020 to 2021, we had immigration that was at the lowest level since around 2003, 2004. You can see literally 2002, 2003, it's around that sort of level. And then the immigration went wild after that. But does this look like a Canadian home price chart? That's what I want to show you. No, it doesn't. Look at between 2020 and 2021, which is right here. Prices went pretty much straight up, and we had the lowest levels of immigration since back in 2002 to 2003. So that completely blows apart this argument that it is immigration. But like I said, immigration does have an impact, because it has an impact on rental demand. We've definitely seen that. Rental prices have absolutely skyrocketed, even though they're still not covering the mortgages and expenses, because this bubble got so euphoric and so large. But that is what people just don't understand. So yeah, immigration can cause a massive uptick in speculation. But what I want to outline to you is when all that immigration stops, especially the non-permanent residents, which it is slowing down massively right now, what is going to happen? Because there is a massive amount of rental supply out there. So that rental supply has got to be absorbed. So it's going to lead to rent prices going down or home prices going down. So it's a hugely risky market to roll the dice in. And people have been acting like this is the most stable market ever. And I think it's that high price that does that. It makes people think, oh, this is more secure. But it's really not the case. And I tend to look at this chart. I will leave it in the description. It's real residential property prices for Canada coming from Fred economic data. And basically, this is adjusted for inflation. So again, take it with a grain of salt, because wages have not been growing with inflation. I think this is what's going to happen. I think you're going to see real home price declines continue. So real estate as an investment, you might see real estate going up at certain points, but it's going to be impossible for it to outpace inflation. So that means probably it will end up being a bad investment, because if you think about it, if your home appreciates from 1 to 1.2 million, but then inflation was 40%, you've got a loss of $200,000. Like the money that you get after that 2 years is a lot less than you would have had if you hadn't have bought that house in the first place for $1 million. And that's with appreciation, just bear in mind. And these things always happen with a lag. So let's get back into more of these declines here. So again, we go back to Brampton and you can see these losses here. Shazzy, you got to check him out because he posts these all the time and you just cannot ignore them when he's posting these things. So these 3 houses were sold at 250K plus losses, and one of them was a power of sale, which is effectively the bank taking ownership of that property. So you can see here, so basically it was sold for 1.3 million and then it ended up selling for 1 million. And you got to bear in mind that was back in 2021. Again, adjust that for inflation. These are actually huge losses. You've got another one here, which was sold for nearly 1.4 million, which sold for 1.12 million. And you've got another one here as well, which was bought for 1.77 million and sold for 1.54 million. And you can see it was listed a bunch of times and didn't sell. And they were even trying to sell it for less. And it's not just isolated to that one, guys. You can literally go through these one by one. So you've got this house, $400,000 loss on Aurora, Ontario. So that's a commuter town that's north of Toronto in the Greater Toronto area. This was bought in 2022 for 1.33 million, sold for 930,000. That is another 30% loss, guys. Again, so it's just crazy. 30%. They bought in January 2022. They sold December 2023, 30% loss. That is absolutely insane. And people say this market isn't crashing. It's unbelievable. So this is Gravenhurst, Ontario, cottage country. We've heard a lot about this crisis. And this is where everybody was flooding to during the pandemic. So it was purchased for 1.8 million. The owners completely renovated it and tried to flip it at the end of 2022 for 2.45 million. Again, speculating, but they ran out of time. Mortgage investment company, MIC, Secure Capital, took it over and is now selling it under power of sale for 2.3 million. And it's going no bid right now. So we'll see what happens with that. But again, this is the MICs that we've talked about in prior episodes. You know, this is your subprime. How are subprime buyers buying homes for this amount of money? It is just absolutely crazy. And I think we'll just continue to see more of these as the private lenders really clamp down. And now I want to share this story as well because it just kind of paints the picture of what is happening for these immigrants that are coming. So Canada job hunting is difficult. I've been in Toronto for almost 2 months with my wife and we still haven't found a job. She's a software developer and I came to study computing at the college here and work at entry levels part-time. In these 2 months so far, we've only had one job interview which didn't lead to anything. And look, she's even applying for entry level so we can try something here. But it's not easy. We only have enough money to keep us here until March, after which it's goodbye and blessings to Canada. For people who are thinking about coming here, think carefully about your planning. Come with plenty of money to spare and college tuition all paid for. Canada is not for amateurs, and unfortunately I was one. 2.5 months now to try and find something and keep hopes alive here. And I mean, that is literally the situation that we have in the labor market right now. This is how people are coming to Canada. This is what people are experiencing when they come to Canada. It's essentially a depression. That's what they're walking into, is essentially a depression. And as I've said many times on this channel, it's a recession when your neighbor loses your job, but when you lose your job, it's a depression. And then you're thrown out into this really, really bad labor market, which you can see there. So anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you're looking for a VPN to get around Trudeau's censorship laws, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here. You might also like this playlist that I picked out for you here. I will see you in the next one, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.